Hello there, it's the 12th of June 2019 and this is Broadcasting Scotland at 7. Well, I was a bit distressed when I arrived at the studio today because I looked at my dressing room and someone had removed my name from the door. There was a star there and the name Chris McCusker was written upon the door, and I couldn't find anywhere to put my things today. But here he is again. He's our resident, almost growing in the ground here at Broadcasting Scotland. And we do need you, Chris, because you've got a mind which at least can make me, but we've got a pile of stuff to get through, so I suppose we better get on with it. Lots of subjects to cover tonight, and the first one up on our agenda, on our multifaceted laser scoreboard, I suppose we might say, is that the Scottish Parliament has voted to allow local councils to run their own bus service. And of course, this is something that goes back to, I don't know if I daren't say the word in Scotland, but Mrs. Thatcher. In 1985, the legislation, the Transport Act, was brought out, and then in 26th of October 1986, the buses deregulation was put forward, and the National Bus Company sold off a load of their stuffs to Shearings, and then there was management buyouts and employee share ownership schemes, and eventually Arriva and Go Ahead and National Express and Stagecoach, etc. Took the thing, and then of course there was a load of problems because various people weren't making the buses quite nice as they should be, and there was bits falling off them, I think, and so the regulators had to step in and blah-de-blah-de-blah. But what it says here, John Finney, the MSP, said, "I'm delighted we've finally ditched Thatcher's ridiculous bus laws. Empowering councils to run their own services is a significant step, which I believe will lead to better services for bus users across the country. 3/4 of public transport journeys are made by bus, yet the number of journeys has been falling year on year as services were reduced and routes slashed." Well, obviously, because if you're running out on a profit basis, obviously you can't do the routes that are not profitable.
Yeah, but in saying that, it all depends on how much profit is going back into the business and how much profit is going to the fat cats at the top. I didn't leave school with a great deal of arithmetic or mathematics, but it doesn't take a ready reckoner on a slide rule to tell you that any business needs inward investment, this situation, to me, you only have to look at Lothian buses as the model. I spent quite a bit of time in Edinburgh, and the bus service to me in Edinburgh is absolutely fantastic. It really is. It's run completely by the council. It's got no involvement with First Bus whatsoever. There are other reputable bus companies, but I can hark back to a day where I can remember that the buses in Glasgow were run by the corporation, which were owned by the council, and to my mind, the bus service was adequate. Some of the stock was a bit, getting on in time and stuff like that, but by and large, I think that the buses before Thatcher broke it all up were, a perfectly viable proposition for the councils to run, and I think that they can be once again. But to my mind, at this moment in time, I think that it's possibly the wrong time to introduce this legislation. Don't get me wrong, I want to see buses go back into council operation, but I think that we should be concentrating on other things, which I'm sure we'll discuss later down the list.
Of course, when you live in a rural area, which many folk in Scotland do, because frankly most of Scotland is rural.
Yeah.
And, you've got Glasgow and Edinburgh and Perth and Dundee. I know these are big towns, but much of the population lives at the end of a long road, and indeed neighbours where I stay, many it's very difficult if they haven't got a car. There's nowhere to get them in. But I mean, it isn't easy to run bus services in rural
No,
communities.
it's not. And harking back again to my own experience, my own childhood, around about 1994, if I'm not giving out my age, the likes of where you live, Ayrshire Way, that was all served by a company called Western SMT. Now they I think off the top of my memory, I think they had 3 major garages in Ayrshire itself, and they covered the whole of that peninsula. Glasgow Corporation had, you know, obviously the wider Glasgow constituency. There was another bus company called Midland, and they done the kind of like central belt in between sort of like Balloch and over to Stirling, Falkirk and all that kind of caper. Lothian buses, as I say, you know, and then further up from that, it was there was a various amount of individual family-run businesses that actually served the community, and they served the community well because that's all that they'd done. Do you know what I mean?
Know, years ago, when I used to go to the Philippines, they used to have these things called jeepneys, which were kind of mini buses, I suppose, open. Folk could jump on, and I think it was kind of where the majority of folk wanted to go, if I recall right. Maybe we should need a system like that. I don't know.
Well, I mean that whole argument there, I have never understood as to why Glasgow done away with the tram system. The tram system in Glasgow, as it was. Actually, San Francisco modelled their tram system on Glasgow. So I mean, come on, a city such as San Francisco that actually looks to Glasgow for its blueprint must mean that we were doing something right. And again, you've got to think of the environmental things, you know, of it, because all they were originally rope pulled. The trolley buses, then they went to electrification, and then latterly, after the last tram had left, they started moving on to the diesel propulsion. And
because I mean, this might be an opportunity, I suppose, to grab a hold of this environmental problem a wee bit. If the council are operating, then maybe the buses become a bit more eco-friendly. I mean, there's these gas buses. There's some that run electricity, aren't there? And even hydrogen ones.
I'm not taking away anything from First Bus. You know, I do know that they have their stock is some of the latest stock that can be, you know, found with regards exhaust emissions, and the buses are getting greener and stuff like that. But my argument today is that, you know, I personally think that buses should be kept out of city centres. And, you know, I mean, okay, we see the tram situation in Edinburgh and stuff like that, but now it's starting to pay off. An awful lot of people in Edinburgh are really enjoying the service that they're getting from the trams. And now they're talking about extending it down to... is it Newbridge or something? Or somewhere like that. So, but I would possibly err on the side of caution and say, you know, have a look at that. Have a look at the trains. Have a look at the. Well,
you mentioned you mentioned something a bit earlier on, because I remember them when I was a wee one. The trolley buses.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you don't need rails. Then you've just got to have an overhead.
Correct. You just need an overhead system.
But then again, I mean, maybe just go to the hydrogen bus. I don't know. But they're starting in London, I think, the hydrogen buses now. Of course, that other thing that we've mentioned a couple of times, and that was mentioned in the Orkney paper the other week about the new invention. I'm going to labour this quite a lot because I want people to hear it. The man in Australia, Neil Melbourne, who's invented a thing to turn the free energy from the wind and the solar into ammonia, which you can transport easily. Hydrogen's a difficult customer to transport, but ammonia is easy. And of course, there's 3 hydrogens and a nitrogen in a piece of ammonia. So you can.
I feel like I'm back at school now, Lewis. Yeah. Thanks very much.
So if you transport the ammonia, you've solved the problem really. If people would get out and do that, then we would.
The other thing worth mentioning about and up at Whiteley Farm on the Fenwick Moor, Eaglesham, between Eaglesham and Kilmarnock. Scottish Power are putting a programme in now about reusable batteries.
Yes, and it's got the planning commission yesterday.
Yeah. So I would probably say that if that
technology
capacity and technology is going to be available, there is a wider call then for buses to become 100% electric.
And of course, my colleague Gordon Ross was talking about the reservoirs being used as batteries in effect, because you can pump the water up the hill.
Correct. Yeah.
And we've got that hydroelectric system all over Scotland.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe we should move on because we've just discussed the buses quite a lot. The next subject we've got here is population. The population of Scotland. Now, I've just discovered something. I mean, there are many different ways of discussing how your population. Now, there's a thing of crude rate of population. That means that you take 1,000 people in the population and you see how many births per 1,000 in the population. That's the crude rate. You can also do it, and I'm sure there's many other methods, but there's another rate which is births per woman. And I went through a great big long list and made a few notes here. Apparently Switzerland, which is a place I know well, has got the lowest, and that's 9.53. And the reason I'll give you some of the numbers is because you've got to see where Scotland is within the rate. But it's apparently Switzerland's kind of the lowest, which is 9.53 per 1,000. When you get down to Scotland, we've got 9.7, so it's slightly higher than Switzerland. But the story is that today there's been a statistic about the birth rate here in Scotland, and it's falling quite a bit. In 2008 it was 11.5. Now the latest rate is 9.7, and of course that has great implications for everything in Scotland. But Fiona Hislop is the person dealing with this for the Scottish Government, and she said the number of births in Scotland has been decreasing long term, going back to more than 50 years, and these statistics further emphasise the challenge we face in growing our population. We need to grow our population to ensure we have sustainable, vibrant and resilient communities to drive improvements in inclusive growth. Whilst there can be many drivers of growth, as things stand, all of Scotland's population growth over the next 25 years, including our working age population, is projected to come from migration. And of course there comes the rub, because immigration is something that's not in the hands of the Scottish Government.
Correct.
It remains down, and we've had absolute horror story after horror story from what has happened to individual people over the last few years. And obviously we need people to come here to Scotland and be welcomed here, so that we've got enough people to do all the things. There have been stories of farmers being unable to get their berries picked in the polytunnels up on the D side there, going up to Perth and from Dundee and so forth. What D side? I meant to say Dundee, not D side. But all those polytunnels that go up between the road between Perth and. So, what do you got to say about that, Chris?
Well, to my mind, I actually think that this is again the birth rate, I think, is linked to austerity. Right? People actually make a conscious choice as to whether they're going to have children, and it's down to how they are based in life. You know, if they are if they're holding their head above water, they're doing reasonably well, they're not scraping around to pay the bills and stuff like that, they could think about having another child, one or what have you. So again, you see the impact of austerity on this. Now, I think Fiona Hislop's 100% correct. And even without me adding in the austerity bit to that, Scotland benefits from migration. And if you look at the population per capita of the actual Scotland Isles itself, there are vast areas of Scotland that are completely uninhabited. Do you know what I mean? You can,
of course, this goes back to the clearances, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, you know, I mean, you can go out for a hill walk and stuff like that responsibly, and you could walk for 4 or 5 hours and not see a single soul. You know, and then you look back at the clearances and stuff like that and see where settlements had once been, and wonder where all those communities went.
I mean, if you've never been,
they obviously went in search of something else to better the family. I think we had this conversation before.
Did. What I was going to say was, I mean, I don't know if all the people who watch this programme have ever been up to Sutherland, up to Caithness, and you've seen the devastation of the little tiny villages, and you see just the ruins of their cottages and sheep, because of course they denuded the land of trees for the wood they needed to build their boats and to sail and do their colonising, and then they needed the sheep for the wool and the mutton in order to feed and clothe folk.
Right.
So this has got a big history behind it, the denuding of Scotland from that perspective. But also, if let's discuss this slightly, because a lot of poorer countries, and historically it would have been an idea to ensure your old age and retirement by ensuring you have lots of children to support you in your old age, and certainly that happens in India, still in many parts of Africa, I think.
You have that side of the argument, but again, I think it's also down, and this is nothing against India or Africa, but the mantra of the Western world, heavily influenced by commercialism and unfortunately capitalism, is that you know it's the here and now and self-preservation has to my mind come to the fore a lot more than my own personal ethos of socialism, which is, you know, to help out your fellow man and you know, for the share of equity around the world.
It's not that long ago that people had that much of a choice, is it? Because I mean, families used to be in my time. You know, families used to be much bigger, and of course the introduction of contraception. And economic prosperity, of course, is economic prosperity often actually diminishes the number of children people have. But there's another strand there of the awkwardness of that awful thing that the people in the South have put on, where the social services are not social. What do you call it? The funds, the universal credit is not available once you've got more than 2 children, unless you can prove that. And that's
that's the classic mantra of the Tories.
Rape clause and all this.
2-child rape cap, but the again, that links into what I was saying earlier about austerity, and austerity is a political choice, coming from the establishment elite, who are basically out for themselves and it's perpetuation this mantra that greed is good.
Yeah, and of course, if people had enough money in their pockets, they wouldn't have to have tax credit, would they? If they got a proper wage.
Well, again, we could diverse from this. I seen an article last week where Nicola brought up the question again of the universal wage. I think it was something like I think it was something in the region of £150 for a single person, £230 for a couple, and that's irrespective of whether you work or not.
I liken that to going and fetch your water. You know, because if you've got to spend all your hours just getting the basics, the time for you to be creative and think about better things to do. And, you know, I think that many people would be very grateful for that, because it would free them to be more creative and think of new things and do more.
Well, yeah, and I think as well as we've discussed a couple of weeks ago as well, the boost to rural economies, if that cash injection is given into families to make their own decision as to whether they would want another child, or whether they would like to extend their house, or whether they would,
of course, not everybody can have children, and
no, of course,
it's not, you must be sympathetic or empathetic towards that. But it is. I mean, I'm very fortunate because I've got delightful children, and and
as have I.
I mean, but I don't know if I could have possibly cope with any more than the ones I got. I certainly wouldn't want any more at my time of life.
Yeah.
But it is a wonderful thing just to have children. If you're lucky enough to have them, isn't it?
And again, I think when you get to our age, I think it's a time where you look back and you can take a bit of pride and see them we've possibly surpassing you and going on.
We've kind of diverged off the story, things. I suppose.
I know, I do.
It's not your fault. I'm sure it's mine. but this migration, obviously, it's something that's vital to the Scottish economy. And of course, it ties in with the Brexit, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you said, with the polytunnels and stuff like that constantly needs labour force, and you could argue whether it's whether it could be filled with Scottish or whether it could be filled with migrants and all the rest of it. But again, there's more to do in the NHS. And not everybody's geared towards a medical profession, so Scotland needs that inward migration in order to support the NHS, which again is currently under fire by the right-wing mantra of the...
Apparently there's 100 nurses coming to Aberdeen this week, from where I don't know, but there's another bother from Australia apparently. And then there's another bother, isn't there, because if we withdraw from the European Union, all the qualifications that people have from other places, I mean, at the moment, anywhere in the 28 countries, every qualification is seen as equal wherever it was got.
Yeah.
But that's going to be another difficult thing for migration. And whatever happens, if you've got the Brexit or the no Brexit, people are going to have to come, aren't they? Because the basics, if you've got almost full employment now.
Yeah. I tend to view those figures that the Tories put out about employment with,
because some of those jobs are just 1 hour a week, aren't they?
Yeah.
Gainfully unemployed.
You look into the gig and you look into the gig economy and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And you see how many people are struggling to even amass 16 hours a week. Do you know what I mean?
And people have to have a wee bit of money in their pocket, don't they?
Of course
so they can go to the cafe, and then the cafe man earns his money, etc.
Again, that goes back to what we were talking earlier on about, money into the rural economy.
I mean, if we continue with the migrants, you see, because another bother with this now is that you've got this thing that Mrs. May brought in about the hostile environment.
Yep.
And that spills over into all this immigration. And of course, then we've got people coming from places claiming asylum. Mm-hmm. And then we've got the next story in our list today, which is the Community Secretary writes to the UK Immigration Minister after Serco announces a plan for the lock change evictions in Glasgow. Now, a few weeks ago, we saw things on television screens of great demonstrations because people were being locked out of their accommodation. The Community Secretary, Aileen Campbell, has called on the Home Office to live up to its responsibility and find a long-term solution for asylum seekers that will not leave them destitute and homeless following Serco's announcement that they are to restart their lock change eviction programme in Glasgow. Ms Campbell has written to the UK Immigration Minister, Caroline Noakes, to ask her to take urgent action. So it's costing Serco apparently about £1 million a year. Of course, they're a business, and business are set up to make money. They're not set up to be social organisations. But actually, Serco their contracts have been stripped from them by their Home Office.
September.
And the Mayor's Group are going to take over after September. So what have you got to say about all that?
Well, again, you know, I mean, as you quite rightly point out, Serco are a company. They're not a very nice company, but
well, I don't know whether they're a nice company or not. I mean, companies be nice? I mean, companies are a legal entity.
Yeah,
but whether they can be nice or not, I don't know.
I think any company can be viewed by the kind of work that it takes out, and there is that argument that you know, hey, somebody's got to do it. Do you know what I mean? And this is the exact same as the company who chap on your door for your television license and stuff like that.
I mean, it's a question of should it be done by a public body, this kind of work?
Well, yeah, you know,
but then the prisons are run by private companies too, aren't they?
Well, yeah, but you know, if you go back to the days before Thatcher, the prisons weren't run by private companies.
Which takes us back to the buses.
Which takes us back to the buses, exactly. So the common denominator here, I hate to point out, and this will come to no surprise to the viewers, is the right-wing Tory party. Do you know what I mean? You know, and again, you know, earlier we were talking about austerity. Now we're talking about the hostile environment that's been created by Theresa May's administration, which has been carried out to the letter by her cabinet, and they are not willing to bend the knee, you know, with regards to what Scotland wants or what Wales wants. It'll pander to Northern Ireland because of the alliance there with the DUP, and they'll give them a certain amount of leeway, but they won't listen to us. They won't listen to Wales.
I suppose it should be pointed out that the hostile environment that's set up by Theresa May is not the only country within Europe. I mean,
no, it's not.
The Hungarians have put up great miles of fences on there, and there's quite a lot of upset about immigration across Europe.
Yeah.
Especially all the folks coming up. But this is
not
necessarily the right wing, is it? It's something else.
I think you can do it with, you know, you can be selective in your language, you can be selective in your attitude, and you can be selective in how you deal with people on a one-to-one basis. And I don't believe that the Tory party are anything other than you know, sort of like one tier selective.
I mean, have you heard? I mean, they're not going to be surely throwing families out onto the street. I mean, is it? I suppose when you're talking about asylum seeking, is it? I suppose some families must come in as a family unit. But I mean, who are they planning to lock out of the houses?
There was a press release that I read from the Home Office today, which was basically saying that it is going to be single men that are going to be, and I think the actual number is 30. I think they went for 30 evictions within the next 4 months.
30 poor young men are going to be...
30 poor young men are going to be basically put out onto the street with whatever belongings they have got.
That's a very healthy idea too.
Well, again, it adds into the how society is going to view these 30 single men. If they're going to be on the street, it then puts pressure onto the council. And the Glasgow Council at this moment in time has got its own issue with the homeless within Glasgow at this moment in time. This is just adding to that burden. Now, whilst they're saying that they're going to release these houses back to the council, it's a kind of double-handed situation, because you're putting people out of a house to free up a house to give to the council so that the council can give it to a homeless person.
Yeah. And of course there are people within Scotland who would say, well, houses should be for the Scottish people. I mean, there are people who would take that attitude.
Well, yeah, there are undoubtedly people that you know would take that attitude, you know, but you have to ask the bigger question, and the bigger question is, why do we have this issue? Why are these people not granted asylum? Mm-hmm. And that's the root of that is the Home Office.
Especially when you go back to the previous story, when we need immigration to...
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and surely a lot of the people, you know, often you find that these people are very well qualified.
Correct.
They know what they've got things that they can do.
And because they're in this status of non-asylum, they are not allowed to ply their trade.
And often these people who are in these situations of being asylum seekers, they're the people who've got the gumption and a bit of money to get themselves out of an awkward situation somewhere else. And actually move. And talented people often.
Well, I mean, I was talking to, a while back, I was talking to Mike Daly of the Govan Law Centre, who's dealing with this issue, as well as obviously others. Chris Stevens, the MP for Govan's highly involved in it. And he said that Mike was saying that the amount of highly qualified people who, because of this status that the Home Office put them in, are not allowed to actually apply their work. Now, see, if you go to, and I'm not talking about randomly selecting people, but if you can clearly see that there's a doctor there, or a dentist there, or a lawyer, or a paediatrician, whatever, do you know what I mean? Surely that should heighten their case in order to stay where, so that they can contribute to society. Because that's all that, any migrant wants to do. They want to contribute to society.
You mentioned the Govan vote. Haven't they got an appeal out at the moment?
They have, at this moment in time. It's ongoing. I wouldn't like to say too much about it. But knowing the tenacity of Mike and the good work that he's done thus far in staving off lock change evictions, I'm sure he will
say much more about it.
Yeah. I'm sure that he will keep it at the forefront of his mind.
The Rocky Horror Show. I beg your pardon. The Total Horror Show. And I think we've got a little bit of Ian Blackford to give us a little bit of a break. And it's always
good
fun
to hear from Ian.
In situ down in Westminster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You would have thought after the time that the Prime Minister spent at the dispatch box, you would realise you're supposed to at least try and answer the question. The state of politics in this place is humiliating. The Tory leadership race is a total horror show. The EU was clear: use the time wisely. And yet the Tories are obsessing with themselves at the expense of people across these islands. Just when we thought that things couldn't get any worse, they're even lurching further to the extremes. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister once described her party as the nasty party. Well, with candidates like the one announcing today, it is about to get a whole lot nastier. Does the Prime Minister agree that the fantasy fairy stories of the Tory party's candidates are nothing more than an assault on our common sense? And tonight, will she vote to stop any no-deal madness?
Yeah, well, this is this no-deal business. I mean, I've sat here in this studio
trying to work it,
talking about these all those indicative votes, and we saw Joanna Cherry's wonderful amendment being trashed, a motion being trashed, and Labour not supporting that. And now I personally thought, and I'm sure I sat here and announced that it's okay, we're safe from the perspective of not being thrown out of the EU without a deal, or leaving without a deal, and it's not the position at all now, is it?
No. I don't know what the exact number is, but I think it's about 6 of the candidates at this moment in time have not ruled out a no deal.
298 to 309. For the vote this afternoon against.
Yeah. So that sort of it brings in the DUP into the equation that I've just narrowly managed to but you don't know how many there could be a couple of rogue Labour MPs that have actually voted for the no deal.
So here we are again with
there was a 3-line whip in the SNP, which I think if there was a 3-line whip within the Labour, then it could have been a lot closer than that. But I would probably suggest that the 10 DUP managed to carry it over.
The prospect is now that 31st of October we leave without.
I don't think it's a prospect. I think it's a reality. I honestly think after tonight it is a reality. And you know, they are all the candidates have said that Theresa May's deal is not worth anything, so they are not going to push that deal. So the only alternative they've got is to push for a no deal and crash out on WTO.
Yeah, and as I've said a dozen times on this show, the WTO people do not understand what they're talking about.
No.
They really have not a clue.
They honestly don't. They honestly don't. And as well as that, when you consider the fact that, and if you analyse carefully exactly what I said there, that I think it's at least 6, it might be 7 of them favour a no deal outright. And I think there's only maybe about 2 or 3 of them. I think Andrea Leadsom is not too keen on it.
She's a no dealer. Red line, she said.
Red line. Well, you know, I mean, that just shows you the direction of travel that the government are going at this moment in time. And in order to get that through, they are going to prorogue Parliament, basically suspend it, and just carry on regardless without any grace or favour to any of the opposition parties, and they're just going to say, this is it, and we need to deal with it. Do you know what I mean? And this has been brought about by the inadequacy of Theresa May in order to negotiate properly with the EU exactly what had happened now. If she had listened to Nicola Sturgeon at the start, when she had said, and not just for Scotland but for Northern Ireland as well, the 2 countries that asked to stay within the EU by a whopping marginal percentage, and she laid out clear plans for us to be members of the common market and to be members of the
single
market and the customs union, and respect the will of the people that voted to remain, and that would leave England and Wales to pursue their own agenda, and they are just not. They're saying the whole lot out.
You see, whichever way you look at all these candidates, and I went through these with Keith Brown the other night. I mean, you've got Michael Gove. Now, he's prepared to think that it'll be a bit longer than October. Matt Hancock, he wants out, doesn't he? Mark Harper, I think he was saying you can't leave without a deal. Jeremy Hunt, he's never sure which way he's going. Savage Javid wants out, and
supported by Ruth Davison, by the way.
And what's that sound? That nice little tweet that Mari Black made, sound if I go to bed now, because he's ordering everybody about.
Yeah.
I'm going to miss the next one for a minute. Andrea Leadsom was definitely a redliner. And Esther McVeigh, she'd be out tomorrow if she has a chance.
Yeah.
Rory Stewart's the only one, I suppose, we've got Dominic Raab in there, but he's appealing to he's a definite out, but he was the Brexit secretary, wasn't he? But Rory Stewart's the one who's but even he, you know, and then
none
of
of
course
them are
we come
attractive.
back.
None of them are attractive to independence, like independence voting public, because the one common thread that is running through their veins, and every single one of them, is unionism. It's to tie us in.
If you've got one of these horror stories in, like Boris Johnson, we didn't think that. Surely that's going to make a lot of people come towards.
A lot of people are saying that, yes, but I'm realistic enough, and I do believe that there would be an awful lot of soft no voters would look at Boris Johnson with his previous gaffes and think, you know, surely there's got to be something better than this. And if the only show in town is the SNP offering independence, then why not? But you've got to admit that if if our resolve is for independence, it's got to be equal to the unionist resolve for the union. Do you know what I mean? And you can't countenance that. Do you know what I mean? If you can picture in your head that woman who was standing in George Square back in the last March, who was shouting at people ferociously because they were wearing a certain football strip or they were wearing another certain football strip. And in one football strip, she was calling them a traitor, and the one football strip that she sort of like agrees with, she was calling him a traitor for being on the march. You're never going to change these people's mindset, and that's obviously the marginal.
Well, there's a bit of a poll here because we've kind of moved to the next subject quite neatly. So the SNP has welcomed a new poll showing that the party would gain seats across Scotland under any of the Tory leadership contenders.
Yeah.
Tommy Shepherd said, "This poll shows that people are putting their trust in the SNP to stand up for Scotland and stand up for Scotland in government and at Westminster, with resoundingly rejecting the Tories. Scotland has been completely ignored throughout the Brexit process." Well, we hear that every time. But having slumped to fourth place in the European elections, the poll suggests a looming disaster for Ruth Davidson, whose Brexit support could lead to a total wipeout of the Tory MPs in Scotland. There's another story coming up that'll tie into this, but go on, give us your...
Well, I completely concur about that. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who is of the mind that it would be 57 or 58 to the SNP, leaving Ian Murray in his safe Labour seat in Edinburgh. And the only other sort of like marginal on that is that you might unfortunately have to put up with Jo Swinson. She's going for the Lib Dem leadership, and I don't think that'll be uncontested. It'd be interesting to see if the people of previous SNP voters who allowed them to slip in the back door, if they actually respond to the current situation that we're in at this moment in time. But let's not forget, it's not just government, and it's not just the Houses of Parliament. Councils across Scotland, which are some are in SNP control, some of them are in SNP coalition. Councils, I think, in the last couple of years, since the last council elections, have been doing a tremendous amount of work, and people are actually seeing how hard, our new influx of councillors are actually working and actually delivering for their local communities. And when communities can see change at a local level, they then look to the party who those councillors are sort of like working on behalf of. Once they look at the party, then they start to look at the party's policies, and there is that natural sort of like progression, shall we say. So it's right to point out the fact that councils are doing just as good a job as the SNP MPs down in Westminster, and obviously our MSPs in Holyrood as well.
If we move into the next bit after this polling, this is something that to me is quite extraordinary. Let's just I'll read a bit of it for you so you've got the idea. A Tory plot to tear up the Scotland Act. Now, if you're a Tory person and you're an MSP, that's if you were a Tory MSP and you were going to tear up the Scotland Act, you're virtually tearing chunks out of the Holyrood Parliament. Okay. Yeah. So, it's
notwithstanding they're actually doing themselves out of a job.
Yeah, but this is the MPs down in Westminster. Now it says here, look. Scotland's cohort of Tory MPs has demanded that the next Tory leader should tear up the Scotland Act, trashing the current constitutional setup and reversing the gains of devolution. In a remarkable article published in today's Times, they suggest that it would be a priority for the new Prime Minister to mount a power grab, wresting control of the decision-making and spending powers currently held at Holyrood.
Yep.
This would necessitate opening up the eroding the powers of the Scotland Act and breaching the current Treasury rules. Commenting, SNP's deputy leader at the Westminster Parliament, Kirsty Blackman, said, "This is an out-and-out Tory plot to tear up the Scotland Act, and we should be deeply worried. Apparently, it is the top priority for Ruth Davidson's MPs that a new Tory leader should trash the devolution settlement altogether and mount a power grab on Holyrood."
No.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Ruth Davidson, it's kind of saying bye-bye to your job.
Exactly.
And then if Jackson Carlisle is behind them, and it's bye-bye to his job and all the guys and SNPs.
Tompkins and all the crew. Do you know, it's like, honestly, it's like turkeys voting for Christmas. You know, and even now, going back to the poll that was cited earlier, that you know, more and more people are coming around to the thought of independence, and the recent performance of the Tories in the EU elections. That sounds to me like Ruth Davidson's just, you know, want to shoot herself in the foot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, surely wouldn't it be, you know, if you were, let's push us on into a little future, and suppose Scotland did become an independent country, then the politics would alter, it would level out, it would change, and then Ruth Davidson would have a good shot, I suppose. Well, I don't know, good or bad, I'm not really up with the polls, but she would have a different kind of chance to become First Minister or Prime Minister of Scotland. Well, and as would the other different parties, correct, the socialist parties or the Green Party with Patrick Harvey. I mean, these people would have a different chance. It would be a different chance.
Well, unfortunately, because of the makeup of the Parliament at this moment in time, the socialists of Scotland don't really have any representation in Holyrood, and I think that's quite a sad thing. I'm saying that as a former member of the SSP. Don't worry, folks, I've seen the light. But I still firmly believe that, you know, Tommy Sheridan once said, you know, that once Scotland is independent, we can create a true rainbow parliament reflective of all voices. So that encompasses your unionist parties, you know, whether they be red or blue, SNP, Green, Socialist, and then you could have, you know, you could have the monster raising London Party in there as well. Do you know what I mean? For all intents and purposes, but what the ethos of what Tommy Sheridan was saying there is that you know, it's independence as a reset for Scottish politics, and it's a chance to do politics different. And when people are looking at, as Ian said, the horror show of Westminster politics at this moment in time, you have to ask, surely there must be something better out there. You know,
of course, in Scotland, the what happens in Westminster is not. There's no way of changing that for us, is there?
No, there's not. There isn't, and you know, it's people need to wake up and realise the fact that Westminster is exactly, it's where it is, and everything. It's like when you throw a rock into a pool, the ripples get smaller and smaller and smaller as you know the rock sinks. So, you know, Westminster works its way from the centre out. Do you know what I mean? So the centre gets everything, and then it sort of like burgeons out and burgeons out and burgeons out. Now people are looking at what's going on with despair at this moment in time, because they don't know where to look, who to trust, and people have to make a decision. They could see it as being a knee-jerk, snap decision as to what do we do? We've been in this union for 300 years, or you know, do we trust the SNP and, you know, we go for independence? Well, hey, I'm sorry. it's not just the SNP that are for independence.
No, it isn't.
Do you know what I mean? There's a wider Yes movement there, you know, encompassing the Greens, encompassing Socialists, encompassing some Labour supporters, some Lib Dem supporters, all the rest of it. I've even heard tell that there's a possible Tory for Yes and all the rest of it. You know, it's not about a party, it's about a country. And people need to get their head round that.
Yeah, and it's the different notion of what the country should be.
Well, correct. You know, and that's why I'm saying once you have an independent country, you can then open up the debate to listen to other people's ideas as to and what that direction that country will travel. You have a look at the countries and the Nordic states, you know, Finland and Iceland and all the rest of it. It's worked for them. You know what I mean?
And it works for so many small countries, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
And anyway, look, business is booming in for growth sectors. Apparently, there's tourism and food and drink, and the creative industries are among the industry sectors that have grown over the past years, according to new figures. Overall, Scottish Annual Business Statistics, that's SABS, if you like the little acronym, for 2017 show an improved performance for the majority of sectors within Scotland's non-financial business economy. So we've got gross value added, creative industries, and that's films and theatres and stuff, I suppose. That's increased by 11.1%. Food and drink sector has increased by 6.3%, and the tourism sector has grown by 6%. And Economic Secretary Derek Mackay said Scotland's growth sectors are hugely important to our economy, so it is fantastic to see them generally improving well. This includes tourism, food and drink, and the creative industry, which have been incredibly successful at an incredibly successful year.
But on from that as well, and harking back to what we were saying earlier about Scottish Power, and Scotland is making great strides in the renewable sector as well, which creates engineering jobs as well. So it's further evidence of Scotland getting on with the day job, whilst there's no legislation getting passed in Westminster for the last 3 years, and yet Scotland are managing to do all this. And you know, and if they can do this with the backdrop of Westminster horror show Brexit behind them, then think what Scotland could do without that backdrop behind them. We can do so much better. You know, again, as you rightly said, there are far many other smaller countries out there that are doing well. I tweeted a couple of days ago, I can't remember, it was something like there were 7 different countries who just managed to surpass Scotland's GDP output by about 2 or 3 million. That's 7 different, an amalgamation of 7 different countries, and yet they just managed to eclipse Scotland. So Scotland is performing well, and the Scottish Government are performing well, and they're making good choices. But just think for a minute what other possibilities that we could do without the horror show behind us.
There's a little thing that I think we could just push in here, you know, because they opened the V&A down in Dundee, didn't they?
Yes.
So you know, I do straw polls with everybody I meet. You know, I meet people at the supermarket or the bus stop, whatever, and I always ask them what they think about this or that and anything else. And there were some horror things I heard today about Mr. Johnson and everything. That was quite the topic of the day. But you know, often you hear people say, well, they could put that money to something better. But when you build something like the V&A, it creates, you know, it's a concentration, isn't it, that brings and attracts and provides for all the different things that are around it. It's what you were saying about the rock in the pool
Yeah.
earlier on, but in a different context. You pop that in there and it radiates and makes business. And I think there's a lot of things that over these last few years Scotland has done very well. That being one. I mean, there's others that are coming up. The new stock exchange, for example, again, it is something that's not only a business in itself. It creates wealth and business around it.
Of course it does.
When you build a hotel somewhere, or you make something up in the Highlands somewhere that attracts people.
I think people have to get away from the centre focus of Westminster and understand that the British establishment are only interested in what happens within the N25 orbital. And people in Scotland need to think about Scotland. And yes, they can have a love and affection for the Union, and yes, they can have a love and affection for the royal family and stuff like that, and an English Sunday roast and a country cottage pub somewhere, in the middle of the Hereford Downs or whatever. That's all fine, fair and well, but that's down there. Think about what you have here, and think what you can enjoy here.
And it's nothing to do. I mean, this is economics, and it's various other things. But we're not trying to cut ourselves off from the rest of the world in any way. Rest of it, from England, it's not that at all. It's not it's to do with taking control and giving the best
Correct.
for the people.
Yes, and it's also about making conscious decisions, which suit our society better. And as you say, it's not about shutting the walls up and becoming an exclusive country. Do you know what I mean? Because you look over the last 6 years or so, that Scotland has just opened its arms. And inclusiveness, not just for migrants, but the LGBT community, all the rest of it. Scotland is a welcoming place, and you think of the amount of tourists that are coming in through Glasgow Airport, through Edinburgh Airport, Aberdeen Airport, and all the rest of it. They're not coming here just to sort of like wander about. They're coming here to see great structures such as the V&A,
Kelpies,
the Kelpies, the Falkirk Wheel, the actual Whiteley Farm itself. As a massive superstructure, which encompasses the area of Glasgow. Which is out in the Fenwick Moors, and it's free for them to wander about and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? You've got distilleries and stuff like that. You've got fisheries and that you can go and view and
growing
participate
tiger prawns in the middle of the Perthshire there, Stirlingshire, isn't it? Chris,
the possibilities are endless, Lewis. You know that, I know that. It's trying to convince others of that.
Scotland certainly. I don't know if I'm like, yes, Scotland's the greatest country in the world.
Well, I think
so I suppose it's coming on for 8 o'clock. We've been blathering here for an hour about all these different subjects.
Great as usual.
And I'm sure we could just carry on, but I don't know if they're getting tired outside, or maybe the audience at home is. So I suppose it's probably time to wrap up the evening's deliberations.
Well,
and
thanks for inviting me.
To tell you that maybe tomorrow Gordon Ross will be here. I'm sure he will. On Saturday we'll be up in Oban. If you want to come with us to the All Under One Banner March, that would be delightful to see you there. Or if you want to watch us and keep up with the story of the day, we'll have a live broadcast from there. There's going to be a few great singers at that one. If you come up, you'll see one very good singer there. Anyway, I hope that you'll have a nice time over the weekend when I'm not here, and hopefully Monday will come around again, and hopefully we'll be here together for a show Monday night. Thank you very much, Chris, for being with us and for all your insights. Lovely to see you again.
Thanks again.
Good night to you at home. Bye-bye.